Hello and welcome to another tutorial in monitoring of forest resources. My name is Lutz Fermann and this time I welcome you in the lecture room because today I'm going to talk about data management. Data management is a very essential component of every forest inventory. If you imagine that bringing out the field teams in the forest is related to enormous costs, then you like to be sure that the data are managed well and that you have a good and appropriate database structure to keep the data and to make them available for the analysis. Already in one of the earlier videos I showed you that we can collect data in the field with a mobile application and a mobile device. And today I'm going to give an introduction on how you can create your own survey for collecting data in the field. We are using here a software that is provided by FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, which is called Openforis. And this is a project that started about 10 years ago and had a very rapid development and is a very appropriate and suitable software for data collection and also data analysis. So welcome on my computer, and now let's have a closer look to the Openforis Toolbox. In the following I will mainly talk about Collect, because this is the central application that we use to create a survey that we can then apply in the field to collect our data. And in the following later I will talk about Collect Mobile, which is the mobile application that we can install from the Play Store, for example, on any Android mobile device and that we can use in the field. Before I jump to Collect, I like to show you the support forum here, because this is very important and also a very helpful support community. So whenever you have questions to the software or problems that you like to report, then please make use of this community support forum. Further, you find some helpful materials here on the homepage in the section Materials, like, for example, some demonstration surveys and some other resources that you can use to get around some problems or to find help. If we open the Collect homepage, then you can here download Collect, which is a server client application. And you also find some other resources here, like single tutorials, single chapters of tutorials, and also a user manual as a PDF document, which is quite useful. I have downloaded and installed Collect on my computer. And once you start OpenForestCollect, usually it starts with a login screen. And the standard login that you can use to log in for the first time is very simple. The username is admin and the password is collect with large C 123. And then you should be able to open Collect. And you see that it pops up in the window, in the browser window, and that means it is a server client application where the user interface is here a browser window, and here you can find all the menus that you need to work with the Collect software. The first point I like to show you is the Survey Designer, and this is the place where we would design and define our survey that we later use also in the mobile application. We have a list of surveys, so if you already started to work with different surveys, you will find them in a list. But here you can also start with a completely empty and new survey, or you can import a survey. For the import, I have provided a file in our e-learning management system. So for the students from Göttingen, they are able to import our demo survey that we are using for some exercises in the field. And it is the same one that I also have here. So this is my list of surveys, and this is the stand inventory Fassberg. If I open this in the editing mode, then we can have a brief look behind the scenes. I don't like to spend too much time on that, because you can have a look by your own on how the software works. I just like to explain the background of our survey. There are some general definitions and settings in this info tab here regarding the title of the survey, some descriptions, the spatial reference system we are using, and maybe also a survey guide, so you can upload a PDF document here that later will be part also of the mobile survey on your mobile device. On the next tab we can define code lists, and code lists give all the different values for categorical variables. I have some code lists here. You see them in German now, but whenever you like you can switch to another language. And this also shows that the software is multilingual. I have only German and English here, but you can add more languages. Whenever you change the language here, you can enter all the details also in English. So this is a typical code list, in this case for the story layer of the trees, just as an example. So trees can belong to understory, to the main stand, or to any other canopy layer. And this is how we define these code lists. So you can add codes, you can also add new code lists, and if you like you can also create hierarchical code lists. For example, if you have a forest type on the first level and a subtype on the second level. So this is the place where we define these code lists. We have another code list which is specific because it is a species list. So this is the place where we can define different species lists. I just have one species list here for tree species, and you see how it looks like here. You find more information on how to format and design a species list also in the help functions, and if you like you can also export a code list for species, just as an example. So I have all the different tree species that I'm expecting to find in the study area here, and I have them with the code, with a botanical name, so the Latin name, and a local name. In this case it is a German name, but you can add more languages also here. This is important since we don't like to give the responsibility to enter species names to the field teams, because usually this will end up in a mess in our data sets, because typing of species names there are a lot of errors that we can do. Jumping to the next point, it's another code list in this case, but a specific one, and this is our sampling point data. And this is in principle nothing else than the sampling design that we stipulated for our study area. In this case it is a systematic sample of 20 sampling locations, and in this list here I have the coordinates of these sampling locations. We can also have multiple levels here, so for larger inventory projects we can group the sample points according to administrative boundaries or to field teams if we like to do that. I like to jump to the last point, which is the most important point, because this is the area where we define our survey. And defining the survey essentially means we need to define all the different variables that we like to assess in the field. We need to group them, and we need to provide all the definitions and characteristics of these variables. You see that I subdivided this into different tabs. You can add tabs just to organize the variables in a useful manner, and I have used 3 different levels here: the plot level, the tree level, and I also have some variables for regeneration assessments. So on the plot level I find the typical variables that belong to the plot or that describe the plot or the stand area around the plot. This can be the coordinates, for example, it can be the slope angle, and whenever you select one of these variables you see that there are a lot of characteristics that we can set here. We can also give an explanation from our field manual that will later pop up on the menu of our mobile device, and that can help the field teams to understand what they should measure in the field. You see that these variables have different symbols because these are different categories of variables. We can simply add variables here on any level or attributes and they can have different formats. It can be code attributes which refer to the code list that we have defined before. It can be date fields, it can be files. One example of a file is, for example, a photograph of the plot. It can be numerical values, it can be text values, and it can be a species field which will use the species list that we defined before. And you see I have defined a couple of variables here on the plot level. And since I can find trees on my plots in a relation 1 to n, because I can have multiple trees on one plot, on the next level I have created a list, a table to hold the tree variables. And that means I'm able to enter multiple trees per single plot. And here in this table you find all the different tree attributes like tree height, dBH, tree number, the species, and some codes also here on this level. Once we are happy with our survey, and usually it takes some time to design a proper survey, we can save it and we can also have a preview. And this is now a preview of the desktop version, so this is how it would look like on a desktop computer. This helps us to get an overview about the survey and check how it looks like. We see all the fields here, all the attributes that I have defined, and I also have these 3 tabs here that helps me to organize the data. So once I entered some information about the plot here, I can jump to the tab trees, and here I have my tree table where I can enter single trees in a list. What we can also implement are some validation rules, and I just like to show how this looks like. For example, I have a dBH here for the trees. Let's enter a quite small dBH of 12 centimeters. And now let's enter a distance that is maybe 12 meters. And you see that I get a warning here because this tree is out. According to the plot design we are using, trees smaller than 15 centimeters are only recorded up to 3 meter distance, and that means we have a validation rule here that helps us to check the data quality. Okay, let's jump back to the list. So once we are done here, this is our survey here, we can publish our survey, and publishing means that we cannot do any big changes on the data structure anymore. So the survey is now ready for data entry, and what we can also do here, we can export the survey definition. For example, if we like to exchange it with other people, but at this point we can also export it to a format that can be read by the mobile application that we will use on our mobile device, and I will show you how this works in a minute. So I like to export this survey and I like to have it in English. You see we have both of our languages here, and then I can export it and download it on my computer. And in a minute I will briefly show you how you import this file again in the mobile application and how it looks like if you look at it on a smartphone screen. I'm now sharing the screen of my smartphone, so probably also in your case you would install this app on your smartphone. It only works with Android, and the app that you are looking for in the Play Store is OpenForestCollect Mobile. So it is this application here, and if we start this one, then probably in your case there is only a demonstration survey pre-installed. If you like to import the survey definition file that we have just exported from the desktop application, you open the menu Surveys here, and you can then download the survey definition file from your local installation, so from your local download folder. It is this file here. It ends with Collect Mobile. So if you open this one, you are importing the survey definition, and then the app directly jumps to the data entry interface. Let me switch to the landscape format in order to make it a little bit easier for you to follow. So the app is quite simple. You find in the upper right menu always some help. You also find the survey guide because we have uploaded it in the survey application. So whenever you have questions to the survey, you can look up the guide here. And this is also the place where you would later export data. For example, if you like to export and save data you collected in the field. Data entry starts with adding a new plot, because the plot is the uppermost element in our survey. And this starts with entering a plot number. You see a number of other variables here on the left-hand side. And you also see some warning messages here because they are up to now no data entered. In our survey, we are not free to select any plot ID, but we only have 20 plot IDs that are predefined, so you can select them here from the list. Let's say we like to go to plot number 10. In the mobile application, you can just swipe to the left to come to the next variable, which would be a team name or an abbreviation for the team. We can then enter a date in our application, so we can select a date and we can measure coordinates, and with this field down here on the right hand side we can also navigate to the location of the plot that we have selected. You see in my case it is 495 meters to the location because I'm sitting in my office right now, and it's about 500 meters to the botanical garden. Yeah, and then we can go on with other entries like slope angles. We can also at this point already say whether this plot might overlap with the stand boundary, so whether it might be affected by border corrections or not. In most of the cases it is not the case. And here you see that we come to the point where we need to enter single trees. Changing to the landscape format again. So this is the point where I enter the tree list. I can now enter single trees here, and you see that then on the left hand side I see all the different tree variables, starting with the tree number. I can enter a species here, and just to show you how the species field works, you can start to type a species code. You can start to type a botanical name, or you can start to type a Latin name of the species. It is an autocomplete field, and you are now referring to the correct name in the species list. So this is how you go on to fill all the data, dBH, for example, tree heights that can be measured later. If you don't like to enter the tree heights at this time where you collect the tree data because it might interrupt your workflow, you can also leave this open and come back to this field later. This is how a categorical variable looks like. So this is one of our code lists, and if the respective tree is part of the main canopy, you can mark it here. You can also find some descriptions for the different canopy layers. So this is how a code list looks like. We can also take some damages here. So if the tree shows some damages, you can add up to 3 damages per tree here. And then all the data are entered for the first tree. To come to the second tree, you need to jump to the next entry in our tree list. And here you see that you would be able to enter another tree. You also see that I get a warning message here because the data are not complete. I missed to enter some of the data here because it was just for demonstration purposes. I like to show you this button on top here where you can get another view of the tree list. At the moment there is only one tree in our list, but if there are multiple trees you get an overview table, and you can simply navigate in this table and also jump to any of the fields. And that means if you, for example, like to enter a tree height later, and you are somewhere in the tree table, you can always open this overview here and you can navigate to the field tree height, and just by clicking for the respective tree into this field you will directly jump back to the field tree height, where you can later enter the tree heights for the different trees. Okay, so once all the trees are entered, we can go on. So jumping over the tree list, we have a table for regeneration that I like to skip now. What we can also do is we can take a photo of the field plot just to show the conditions of the plot and maybe the regeneration conditions. And we can also select in the next step the specific device we use for installing a Bitterlicht plot. It can be a dendrometer or it can be your own sump, whatever you are using, and it will have a certain counting factor. And then you can do a Bitterlicht plot, so you can count the entries here, and finally you get a result for the basal area in square meters per hectare, which is in this case already slope corrected based on the slope angle that you entered before. Okay, let's assume you have entered all the data. We can go back to the uppermost level. You see I have some data for one plot, plot number 10. Still a lot of errors remaining because it is not complete. I just like to show you how you can export the data now. So here in the upper right menu you find the export function, and this is how you would export the data. They will be stored in the download folder of your device, and once you store the data there you can re-import them to the Collect mobile application, and this is what I like to show you finally in a minute. Coming back to Collect desktop, we can import the data in the area data management. So this is the area where we can see all the different surveys that we have published. So in this case I take this one. So this is a survey that I used before for a group of German students, and they also collected a number of plots and data on these plots, and this is now the place where I can import the data the students have sent to me from their mobile smartphones. So I have the file here, so this is the Collect data file that they sent to me, containing hopefully all the plots that they have measured. I can import it here. I get also an overview and a first analysis of the data. It seems that not all the 20 plots have been measured by the students, but that's fine. And now I can import the data, which can take a minute. And once the data are imported, I get an overview. First of all, I can immediately see that there are some errors in one of the plots. The rest seems to be very nice. So without looking at the data now, I can, if I like, directly export the data here to CSV or Excel format for further data analysis. And this is what we will do in our next video. So in this case, I directly export as a CSV or an Excel file, and we can do data analysis in R, for example, by reading the CSV files, or we can do some basic data analysis also in Excel. Let's have a look on one of the plots here, just to see how it looks like. So we will see the same forms again that we have seen at the beginning of our video, only that now some data are filled in. You see that I'm here using the German version because this was collected by the German students. And you also see that if we switch to the tree table, that we have all the different entries for trees here. And you see they have measured quite a lot of trees. So let's see how we analyze the data. I will now export the data, and I'm using a CSV format here. I can do some settings for the data export. First of all, I have not talked so far about different levels of data preparation. We are here using data that have just been entered. There was no data cleansing and there was also no preparation for data analysis. These are all different steps in the predefined workflow. So we are just using the entered data without any changes. And we can make some additional options. We can check some options down here that are helpful if I just want to see the data in Excel, for example, and not in a relational database. I can, for example, include the code item label. Otherwise, I will only include the codes of categorical variables, but not the labels of these different variables, and that might be very helpful. So we export this and save it in our download folder, and in our next tutorial I will go on with some basic data analysis, looking at the data and checking also the data quality. So thank you very much for watching up to here. For all the students from Göttingen, please remember that using the Openforis Toolbox is not relevant for your exam. Okay, I hope now you have a better understanding on how this Openforis software works, and maybe you are now able to design your own survey and make use of this software also for your own projects. Thank you for watching so far, and see you in one of our next tutorials.